Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to Tag Tuesday. I'm here with the Nimrod Book Tag. This tag was created by Matthew over at Mayberry Book Club, and I really like the tag. You know, I do a lot of tags and I always worry when I get tagged or I'm going to do tags that I'm just kind of repeating the same books over and over again and kind of saying the same things. And this is not the fault of taggers or tags or anything like that. It's just, perhaps I do too many tags. I say that, and then I think I have like 3 tags to do sometime in the next week or so. But I want to do this one because Matthew kind of told the story about how the word Nimrod has come to mean something different than originally it meant. I believe originally Nimrod was the name of a really capable warrior, but in the hands of Bugs Bunny, a Bugs Bunny cartoon, he asked, I think, Elmer Fudd if he was some kind of a Nimrod, and people assumed that Nimrod meant stupid or incapable or fumbling. And so that just became kind of what the word means. And so this is a tag that I kind of ask questions about, you know, things whose meaning is different or things that were unexpected or things that have changed. And I really thought the questions were pretty unique, which is not unusual for Matthew. So I thought I would do this tag and hopefully I can read my handwriting. So prompt number 1, here comes Zelda because she heard me talking. Hello, Zelda. And Ike will be along behind making his teapot noise. Prompt number 1, a book that made you feel stupid. There are lots of books that have made me feel stupid. Ulysses, 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. There have been a number of books that have made me feel stupid, but you may know that every once in a while I read a science book. Particularly, I am interested in physics with absolutely no background in physics at all. And I think last year I read this book, Through Two Doors at Once, The Elegant Experiment that Captures the Enigma of Our Quantum Reality. I read this book, which is about the experiment with light, where you essentially beam light photons at a double slit, something with a double slit in it, and it creates patterns that seem to indicate that light doesn't behave like anything else that we think about, that sometimes behaves like a wave and sometimes like a particle, and that then creates this kind of, one of the ways in which we kind of create this idea that the quantum world and the visible physical world seem to operate by 2 different sets of rules which don't necessarily, we haven't figured out exactly how they fit together. For most of that book, the author did a great job at keeping it at my level, but every chapter got a little bit more conceptually difficult for me as a non-science and physics person. So by the end, I definitely felt like I was not getting all the information or understanding everything, and that made me feel a bit stupid. Let's see, prompt number 2, a book you wanted to love but couldn't. I have 2 for this. One is John Steinbeck and The Grapes of Wrath. So, you know, again, if you watch my channel at all, you probably know that my background, my strongest reading background is in, you know, what we might think of as classic American writers of the 20th century, and that my focus early on was strictly male writers. And so, you know, this explains my, my old reading, my extensive reading in Faulkner and Hemingway and Fitzgerald and some others. And you know, Steinbeck is one of those authors, and I'll be honest with you, I just don't like The Grapes of Wrath. I just don't. I've read it twice. I liked it less the second time than I did the first time, and I struggle with John Steinbeck in general. I am going to try to read East of Eden sometime because a lot of people have said that book is, you know, in their opinion, that's Steinbeck's best book. I do like a few short works by Steinbeck. Cannery Row is my absolute favorite Steinbeck because it's funny, and I think he does a good job with humor. And I think also Tortilla Flats, I think, is another one of my favorite Steinbeck books. And then last year for Victober, I reread Wuthering Heights, you know, thinking that, you know, my new Victorian literature sensibilities that maybe I've developed since being on BookTube would make this book, you know, resonate more with me and I would like it more. And again, I think I actually ended up liking it less. So those would be 2 books I wanted to love but didn't. Prompt number 3 is a book you wanted to hate but couldn't. Okay, so again, going back to my embarrassing history with books, for a long time, I really resisted reading Jane Austen. And that's because all I ever heard was how great Pride and Prejudice was, and I'd seen the movies, and I thought, this book has to be overrated. You'll have to forgive me the transgressions of my youth, but in my youth I assumed that Pride and Prejudice was just a book for women, and that only women liked it. And so, someone challenged me to read it, and I read it intended to come out with the exact same impression, and of course Pride and Prejudice is just great. It's just a great book. There's no way around it. Since then I've read some other works by Jane Austen, Persuasion, which I like better, but Pride and Prejudice is a great book. I wanted to hate it, and I ended up actually liking it quite a bit. And then the other books here I would put are just the Harry Potter books. Came in late to the Harry Potter books. My wife and kids read the first 2 books and raved about them. And I think I saw the first movie, the first Harry Potter movie, and then, I kind of agreed to start reading the books with book number 3, which I did. And, I'm not in any way suggesting that they're perfect, that there aren't plot holes, that they're great works of literature, or even the writing is particularly good, but man, they're good stories, and they move along, and the characters, I found to be charming, and the story I found to be good, and so I wanted to hate the Harry Potter books, and I didn't. Let's see. Prompt number 4 is a book you no longer enjoy. I just kind of went with an author I no longer enjoy here, in keeping with what I was talking about with Steinbeck. I also read extensively in Kurt Vonnegut. I read so much Kurt Vonnegut that at one time I think I'd read almost every novel that he'd published. And so I think the number of Kurt Vonnegut novels I would have read probably comes in around 10 or 11. And while I still think that Kurt Vonnegut was a guy who had unique and interesting ideas and an interesting way of putting them, I really don't enjoy them anymore. They kind of feel like something that has lost its luster for me, its appeal to me, and so I would say Vonnegut's books in general I no longer enjoy, even though it's possible I'm going to try to reread 1 or 2 of them in the relatively near future to see if I've just, decided if I'm just overly harsh on Vonnegut. Prompt number 5 is a book that when you reread it, you liked it more. I've mentioned this book several times, and that's Plainsong by Kent Harif, which I was encouraged to reread by Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading and Jason Old Blues Chapter and Verse, and they were right. I really liked this book the second time I read it. Then prompt number 6 is a book you love by a writer you dislike. I love Blood Meridian. I don't like Cormac McCarthy. So without angering or frustrating Una and using the P word, pretentious, let me just say that Cormac McCarthy, the human being, seems like someone I would dislike. I've seen a few interviews with him, famously one from Oprah. I've read a little bit about his life, in particular the way he treated his various wives. I have a tendency to think that if you are divorced 3 times and none of your ex-wives has anything good to say about you, it's probably you and not them. And there's just something in the interview he did with Oprah that just drives me crazy. And that is that he essentially said, and I'm not saying you have to plot your books, but he essentially said he doesn't do any plotting, that the book just kind of writes itself. And I have to tell you, this kind of thing drives me crazy. I realize that this is true for lots of authors. But this whole idea that the book just kind of exists and you're pulling the sentences down, and writing them in this great way because you're a literary genius and, your ways are mysterious and there's no real method, and, that to me just feels like, I'm not going to use the word, Una, that to me just feels like, coming from the mouth of someone like Cormac McCarthy, that just feels like, an attempt to put what he does beyond the realm of regular people. And I just don't believe that. And I will just point out that a lot of the writers who were my heroes in my youth, like Fitzgerald, were meticulous plotters. Fitzgerald meticulously plotted his books, famously so, and had like flowcharts almost on the wall. And I'm not sure, and this may be for some of you like comparing two writers who aren't very good. I'm not sure that anything McCarthy wrote is better than The Great Gatsby. And so it just bothers me. And of course, if that's his method, that's fine. But it just feels like one of those things you say to make yourself sound more mysterious and what you do sound more mysterious than it probably actually is. But I do really like Blood Meridian. I've reread it. I think I've read it 3 times. And it's been one of those books which has never, it's just gotten better every single time that I've read it, and I've enjoyed it more every single time. I know it's not for everybody, and that's fine. I know Matthew didn't particularly like Blood Meridian, and that's fine. To me, liking it is a matter of taste. I wouldn't go out and tell you that if you don't like it, you don't know anything about literature, because that's just dumb. There are all kinds of things you can criticize about it, but for me, it's beautiful and haunting and powerful, and that's me. So that was a book by an author, a book that I love by an author I don't like. The next prompt 7, was a book you dislike even though you like the author as a person. Well, this is more difficult for me. I don't necessarily admire writers anymore as people. I'm sure there are writers that are worthy of admiration. But I think that's a slippery slope. As soon as you say, oh, well, I really admire a writer, then you open yourself up to, oh, well, did you know that, he did this awful thing? Or do you know that he said this awful thing? And then I'm like, well, no, I didn't know that. I guess I like him less. So instead of, and then to find a book that I don't like by an author that I do like as a person is even more difficult. So I just went with a book by an author that I think is okay, that I didn't like, and that is Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. I didn't like this book. I realized this is supposed to be the ultimate book. And right here in my little, superimposed sticker says that the Booker Prize says this is the best book in 25 years. Well, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I really disliked it. And then prompt number 8 says a book you still want to love one day. So I would say that I would love to find a Thomas Hardy book that I love. I read Far from the Madding Crowd and I liked it. I didn't love it. I would also like to love Henry James. I've read a few books by Henry James, and to be honest with you, that style is really, I can see that there's beauty in it, but it really prevents me oftentimes from loving the works themselves. The closest I come to loving Henry James is Daisy Miller, which I thought was fine. It also helps that it was really short. Anyway, so those are the prompts for the tag, and so then I'm going to tag some people to keep this tag going, because I think since it asks questions that are a little bit unusual for BookTube tags, that it's worth trying to keep going. So I'm going to tag 4 people. Lindsey from Lindsey's Book Life, I'm tagging you. Jason from Old Blue Chapter and Verse, you tagged me recently, so I'm going to tag you back. Rick MacDonnell, his channel used to be called Another Kick of the Canlet, and I know Jason just tagged you to do the 10 years 10 book tag, I think. But I'm going to tag you anyway, because we've been exchanged some comments about the novel Ohio recently. And then another relatively new to me channel is Karen Evans. So Karen, if you watch this, I'm tagging you as well. I'll leave links to Matthew's original tag video down in the show notes below, as well as the prompts. Let me know if you have real issues with what I said about McCarthy, about Midnight's Children, about John Steinbeck. We can go back to the Wuthering Heights thing again. More than happy to field questions about my lack of continuing love for Kurt Vonnegut. Ask me those questions in the comment section down below, and as always, thank you for watching.